Let's welcome our next speaker, Jamie Hurt. Jamie is the Director of Sales with Spectrum Reach, and that's the media division of Charter Communications. Company culture in a hybrid environment, which we've all been experiencing for the last few years, is a passion of Jamie's, and she's going to share with us. Welcome, Jamie Hurt.
Thank you. Okay, I want everyone to know these are my own words. I did look up a few statistics that I did old school, not through AI. So I am happy to share my resources when we finish, if you want them. All right, did you all know that 77% of job applicants evaluate a company's culture before applying for a job? 77%. And 47% of job applicants will leave their current jobs because of a bad company culture. If you think about that number in your department or area, that nearly half of those, your teammates, will potentially leave if culture is not a priority. That is pretty eye-opening. I'm obsessed with workplace culture. It absolutely is a passion of mine because it really can have such a profound impact on several very significant aspects of the employee experience that really aren't necessarily related to their performance, such as team morale, workplace engagement, and job satisfaction. So if you think about those three things, team morale, workplace engagement, and job satisfaction, they almost have nothing to do with their job performance, but they certainly have impact on job performance. So have you all ever asked your teams what work culture means to them? I pretty much would guess you'd get about 10 different answers. And if you ask 10 people to rank on a priority scale how important it is, I bet you'd see a lot of very important or high marks on some kind of a survey. It is consistently one of the highest ranking priorities that matters most on an employee survey and just has so many different meanings. There are dozens of published studies out there supporting. Obviously, you can ask ChatGPT, or you can go old school as I did, and I Googled it to support how I feel. And one other stat I'll throw out is that 84% of recruiters state that culture fit is now becoming one of the key factors when recruiting. So it's really no accident that culture is a passion of mine. Growing up, my father made his living as a restaurant and catering entrepreneur. And it's also no accident that I love food and love to eat. And we can talk about that on a different webinar. I can always go deep on the food subject. All right, so back to the backstory about how I came to love workplace culture. My uncle ran the catering company and my dad ran the fast food franchise. And at one point we were the in-house caterer and food service provider at Arrowhead Stadium. And when that contract ended, we were the food service provider at our convention center, Bartle Hall in Kansas City. So in my younger years, I worked at Arrowhead in the club on game day Sundays. And then I would also help check in temp workers at Bartle Hall for conventions or any, outside help we were having come in and work for these large conventions. I also used to go with my dad on Saturdays to make the rounds to all of the restaurants. And it was pretty cool because I was getting job experience in customer service and running a business without even realizing it. So through the years, I watched my father and my uncle support and take care of people who worked for our company pretty much in any capacity. They co-signed on first houses, on cars. They had flexible schedules so staff could attend kids and family events. And they used to have a company holiday party in our home. It truly was a family business in every sense. And our employees absolutely were our extended family. My dad, I have two older sisters, and my dad used to say that, any of his female employees were his fourth daughter. So I have a lot of fourth sisters out there. And it was always a joke in our family. So I really saw it and lived it my entire childhood. My father and my uncle were really incredible examples of how to run what I consider an employee first business. And watching this behavior obviously set the tone for how I approach building culture with our teams now. I did end up working in our family business once I was out of college and later on in my career. and came home and ran it for the last 3 years before we sold in 2013. And at that point, that experience left me with a very deep understanding of how your actions and behavior as an owner or leader has an incredible impact on a healthy work environment, really in any industry and on any level, from hourly employees to salaried employees. Culture matters. So it was kind of neat once I figured out that, I watched this and I lived this my entire childhood, but then to actually work in it and be a part of it has, given me the foundation for where I am now. So being able to see the people thrive and personally and professionally yielded that loyalty to our family and our business and our reputation in Kansas City, that we were a good family to work for, which attracted labor at all levels. So when I was running the franchise toward the end, before we sold, I had several of those aha moments. When I spent time in the restaurants working directly with the staff, I was really able to see firsthand how their performance, productivity, and general happiness were contagious and had positive effects on their customer service, which resulted in better customer satisfaction, and happy customers who walked through the door to eat there would come back more often. And it was really a trickle down effect that started with me, which I learned from my dad growing up. So that the first aha was, not only do I have customers who walk through the door and pay to eat here, but it starts with my customer base, which is the staff and the employees were my customers and my first priority. My other aha moment was when I was running the franchise that, really people closest to the problem know how to best solve it. Very quickly, I was able to see that it didn't matter. Title, salary, position made no difference for providing critical information to improve or solve or fix an issue. These were the people who were in that line of fire day in and day out dealing with the issues, and they were best suited to help fix the problems. Leaders were the voice to share that information, but asking for input from the actual boots on the ground contributed to that positive culture we strived for, because they felt like they had a say in this place that they worked and what we were building and how we presented ourselves in the community. So now, as the market leader at Spectrum Reach in Kansas City, I feel like I have to dedicate intentional time into building culture two ways, through both the feeling side of culture, and then what are we doing to build culture? And this approach really was built on the foundation of treating your employees as your clients and empowering those people closest to the problems to help fix the problems or be part of the solution. It does not happen one time a year. It's a living, breathing thing that goes on. It's ongoing throughout the year. And then you throw in that pandemic curveball, and now it really becomes an ongoing, living, breathing thing. It's kind of incredible to think about how we functioned just 3.5 years ago and how we've had to evolve and reinvent so many workplace practices after March 2020. I mean, how many times did your workplace practice change in the last 3.5 years? And so now that brings us to how we can build culture in this hybrid world. What can we do to make people feel like they're part of something when we don't have in-person connection, or our in-person connection is maybe limited to less than 5 days a week? We don't have that mindless chit chat at the coffee station and last minute lunches and spontaneous collaboration for 10 minutes. The hybrid may be more efficient for some, but it does eliminate that spontaneity that provides that feeling of purpose, which is why we have to be so much more intentional about, building that culture that is important to all of us. So first, you've got to get to know your team on a personal level. If I saw the movie, or if any of you saw the movie The Blind Side, you remember the scene when Sandra Bullock interrupts the high school football practice to motivate Michael, So he'll get aggressive with his tackles because the coach wasn't having any luck hollering at him from the side. And after she says something that resonates, he successfully makes that big tackle. And Sandra Bullock walks right back by the coach and says, "You should get to know your players, Bert." Well, in the hybrid world, we have to get to know our players. Whether, again, it's fully hybrid, part in, part out, you've got to get to know your players on the team. And I do find that I have to be more intentional about this. When I had 5 days to do this, I never thought twice about it. It just happened organically. Now it's intentional. And so in our office, we have a hybrid. We're in 3 days and we're out 2. So the majority of my personal connecting happens on those 3 days when we're in the office. Second, recognition and celebration of your people in various ways. You've got to create new rituals that really highlight whatever is most important to your team beyond the birthdays and the work anniversaries. Those are important and those should be celebrated, but you've got to find new rituals and new ways to make people feel like they're noticed and that their contribution is being celebrated in whatever way that makes sense for you and your teams. I've got a dedicated hour on my schedule every Friday to think through where we need to do some reward and recognition. And it stands on my calendar year round. And so when I see it, it's time to do it. Think through the week and what shout outs I need to do and what other notes I need to take for annual reviews. Third, you've got to establish whatever the hybrid rules are and stick to them for all employees. That way there's no resentment when one person needs an exception for something. And you've just those guardrails need to be in place. It makes people again feel like they've got a purpose, they've got a playbook in how they come and live and breathe and work and participate in the office, and everyone is on that same playing field. And then finally, it is an old cliche phrase, but leading by example. Are you present at the office or are you present online? Are you making exceptions for yourself and like working this day and not coming in this other day, or working remotely, far, far remotely when maybe you're not supposed to be? Or, are you bending the rules for yourself? But set the example for your team. Are you involved in local industry groups for networking purposes? What about some of those internal employee resource groups? Your team will follow your lead and make them feel like they are part of something, because there is something also very profound with culture. It overlaps with purpose. Employees want their work to be more than a job. It's got to align with their overall purpose. So show your teams how you live your purpose daily. Walk the walk, talk the talk. All right, so we've talked about feeling, how we use feeling to build culture. Now let's talk about what leaders can do to build culture. And here's where you get to take action and what I think is really the fun stuff. So I'm a firm believer that your management team or some other faction of leadership in your office or what you call your board of directors has to help own building that culture. It can't be one person's responsibility. In our case, I've got a management team of about 8 leaders who represent different departments within our company. So it's a nice representation of, the overall makeup of our office and, again, our bigger company. My team knows culture is my number one priority, 365 days a year. I never had to issue an edict. They had buy-in because those who had been here long enough, myself included, had seen a toxic culture and how it really can wreak havoc on an office environment. So it's easy to figure out culture when you know what you don't want it to be. So when I was awarded this role 5 years ago, my coworkers supported my mission to turn our culture around. All of us rowing together and being aligned made it very easy to turn it around. But I had to set the tone and I had to see if my initial playbook needed tweaking. My management team helped me bring those ideas to life and roll out some new best practices. So here's what we do. Twice a year, we plan our culture calendar of events, outings, And each manager, each of the 8 managers picks a month. They form a committee of staff that's a mix of a couple different people from different departments. And that way we've got buy-in across the, our office, which is made up of about 34 people. So we've got buy-in across the board, and our participation is typically about 100% of anyone who's working that day. I mean, if they're out sick or out of town, but we have about 100% participation. So the managers plan one themed, like potluck or some kind of a meal together in the month, and then one activity. The small committees meet, they plan, they execute the events. And it certainly is not mandatory, but our team has done a really, really good job creating FOMO, so nobody ever wants to miss out. That has been a huge success for us. And the other thing we do is we ask the people. I'll do a Survey Monkey once or twice a year. How are we doing with our events? Is it too much, too little? What would you like to do? What are some of, what are your suggestions? We get that buy-in from the entire team. And then we are crafting our culture that really is employee first culture. Because again, we want the people who are closest to those problems and closest to helping, drive the culture, help participate in the culture. And we will implement those ideas from our office. I mean, have we whiffed a couple times? Absolutely. This year, I don't know what the heck happened in May, but our May committee was a little over the top with like this whole Kentucky Derby theme. And somehow we scheduled about 3 or 4 events in a matter of like 6 in-office days. I mean, we were all like, okay, we got to pump the brakes on this. And then the June committee wanted to outdo May. And plus it was our big Spectrum Reach Employee Appreciation Week. And so thankfully mid-year planning happened in July. We reined it in for the remainder of 23, and we set our 2024 social calendar. But everybody knows, everybody participates, and I believe that we have a really fantastic culture in our Kansas City office. So spend some intentional time with your board of directors or whoever helps lead your teams to be thoughtful and creative with building your culture in whatever situation your employer has set. Your team really will recognize the time, energy, and effort that you've spent to create this positive workplace culture. Create those new rituals and give your team purpose. And you will build that loyalty, which also will result in workplace engagement, team morale, and job satisfaction. So I'll leave you with this. If anyone on your team were asked to describe your culture, what would you hope they say? Establish the leaders in your office who can participate in crafting and executing your culture. Take the temperature of your team and see what works. Get to know your players, plan your calendar, and create some FOMO. You do those 4 things, the answer to that question will always be positive. Thank you.